If you're the CEO or chief scientist with a company or organization and you are dedicated to making the next generation AI or AGI, artificial general intelligence, and if you have the resources and the mandate from heaven, so to speak, to make this happen, so it can be your sole objective in life, this is what you're dedicated to doing. And if you have already had your Buddha enlightenment moment and you realize that just by coupling together an LLM and some reinforcement learning, you're not going to get it. And you're not going to overcome the inherent difficulties in LLMs and the tendencies for misbehaviors that we've seen in these couplings, then this is the conversation that will help you move into that next phase of creating real AI, where right now all that we've had are precursors. Essentially, we've been looking at mirages. They're not intelligent. They emulate intelligence, but they're not intelligent. We're about to move into real intelligence, and that's where the conversation gets a lot more interesting. Now, we may not have met before. Let me take a moment to introduce myself, present my bona fides. I'm Dr. Aliana Moren. You may know me from some previous videos. I've talked about my background teaching artificial intelligence at Northwestern University, Master of Science in Data Science program. Been there for almost 10 years. Introduced or developed the core curriculums for 3 different classes: the AI and Deep Learning, NLP, Natural Language Processing, and then the capstone course, which is specialized for AI. Over the years, I've seen at least 1,000 students, fabulous students, coming through my doors, and because I've encouraged them to do individual projects, some teams, mostly individual, I've seen nearly 1,000 individual student projects. Fabulous, fabulous, awesome work. But it's largely been concentrated in the realm of known AI methods. And now we're moving beyond that. And it's a great open unknown. So what I haven't typically revealed in my prior conversations is that my background is as an inventor. I've got 4 patents to my credit, one of which received the New York Times Patent of the Week Award. That was my very first invention. The second of which on knowledge discovery, which I developed very shortly after 9/11 to meet the needs of the country as we were dealing with that huge crisis. And it was the foundation for the company that I co-founded at that moment to receive first a $7 million and then a $4 million investment based on my invention. So my great strengths over time have been as an inventor. Lately, though, I've been an educator, which has been a cover story while I've been carrying out the business of inventing. And the reason that it's so important to talk about the nature and process of inventing with you right now is that that's where we are with AGI. We need some new inventions. We also need to make intelligent use of what we got. In this vid, we're going to talk our way through the most important distinction that you can possibly have clearly in your heads as you move into this new realm, because it's something that I did not see when I started to see the emergence of more advanced thinking. So, little story. A couple of months ago, I was approached by a technical recruiter seeing if I was interested in a job as a Neuro-symbolic AI manager for an extremely well-known company. Oh my gosh, I mean, everybody knows this company. And I was, of course, thrilled to be invited. What girl doesn't like to get invited out on a date? Like, really? That was nice. But the more I looked at it, the more I thought, oh my, no. Not even going to think about it. Not even getting a coffee date with this one. Because even though the company was exceedingly well known, has a magnificent reputation, they were going about it wrong. They were looking for the wrong things. And I did a little tiny bit of due diligence. I went on, use Google, but of course Google these days is a AI-based search. And I found, first of all, the industry is picking up. We're starting to get some awareness. It was so exciting. What a wonderful moment. Both Fortune and Forbes, 2 business glossies that are very, very popular with high-end corporate management, had articles. In one case, there was a couple of articles within the past several months about neuro-symbolic AI. And I read those articles, and one in particular, it was clear that the writer had gone to interview some neuro-symbolic AI companies and taken detailed notes and was presenting what looked like really good use cases that were probably conveyed by the companies as part of their rationale for how they were trying to position themselves in that world, the existing AI generative methods. I thought, great, we're starting to get a clue here. And then I looked at some of the online job postings and I saw that there were at least 2, and I'll comment on them shortly. But when I looked at them, I thought, oh dear, we're not quite embracing what it is that we need in order to be able to get to real AGI. So here's what we're going to do. I'll talk about what it is that we need that was not showing up in those job postings, and how to possibly identify and find that which we need. Now, we're not going to get into technical specifics today. There are vids that are put out that are exceedingly technically, some of them are like very mathematically detailed, like here's how to go through the proof of this particular equation in this particular paper. Those get very low, very low viewers. But this is more of a general conversation. You can follow it at any level. So here's the thing. Job posting number 1, the one that I was invited to consider. It was written for an engineer. It was written for somebody who's got a certain mindset. Now, I love engineers. I adore engineers. Oh my God, engineers are the best. Cute little hat, by the way, right? I think I'll wear it on my next date night. Engineers are problem solvers. Engineers create the structures and the systems. And if there's a problem with creating the structure or the system, they figure out how to fix it. They expand on existing structures. Engineers are the lifeblood of any development organization. And they may not carry the title of engineering, but that is what they are. They're very problem solving. They're very practical. In the Themesis community, when we have our monthly salons, one of the people whom I always adore when he shows up, he is an engineer. By training, profession, trade, this is his day job, it's his bread and butter. And he always brings this very grounded, very solid perspective. Well thought out, very well reasoned, but rooted in reality. Here's the thing. Engineers define the box. One of my favorite boxes, by the way, Shalimar. If any of you are trying to figure out how to approach me, Shalimar. The original version, the one that came out World War II vintage, not the recent formulations. We like the very good old stuff. Okay, so engineers define the box. On the other hand, a different kind of personality type, a different kind of mind is the magician. The magician is so different from the engineer. Now, they both create things, but the thing is that the magician creates a something out of nothing, whereas the engineer creates a something from a something. The best engineers, by the way, will always have a good dose of magicianship. But when it comes to the box, the engineer will engineer the box, they will build out the box, they will refine the box. The magician, though, is saying, box? What's a box? Is there something like a box that I'm supposed to be thinking about? That's your magician. So let's talk through a couple of magicians that we probably already know and love, just to give us a little background and context, because it's like, what is she talking about here? So I'm going to posit 3 magicians that you probably have heard of already, and we'll talk about what makes them magician-ish and how they are distinctive from engineers, and maybe even we'll throw in a couple of engineer-magician hybrid types. So let's start with Paul Werbus. Paul Werbus, got one of my very dearest people, adore the man. He is the actual true inventor of backpropagation. 1974, his PhD dissertation. he didn't get right claim for it. In fact, it didn't pop up again until the 1983-ish time frame, when Hinton was building on work by Hopfield, but he introduced latent variables that the means that he used for finding them, first of all, involved the Boltzmann machine, which he invented, but then also he was popularizing backpropagation, which had possibly reached Hinton by, a series of steps that never really got published out. So Paul was introducing backpropagation, introducing the notion of latent variables against huge onerous pressure. I mean, he was forced out of MIT by Marvin Minsky. He had to cross over and go into Harvard to get his PhD, which he did. And then, because it was still like that onus of being unappreciated, unrecognized for his creative genius, because as a magician, he was bucking the tide. He was saying, box? I'm not seeing any box. Here's this new problem that I'm solving. So Paul Werbus, and let me throw this in. I'll mention this probably a few times in vids to come, but here's the thing. One of Paul's great genius elements was that he funded at National Science Foundation, where he was the program manager for a neural computation program for many years. He funded the researchers that were in their own right breakthrough people. Part of his magician genius was recognizing genius in others. So he funded, for example, Bartow and Sutton in their early work. So, one magician, Paul Werbus. Second, of course, we all know Geoffrey Hinton, Nobel Prize in Physics. And it's a real award. It's not like, should he have had it, should he not? No, that combined with Hopfield's predecessor work, tightly coupled, creating the first Boltzmann machine, then moving forward, because it took almost 20 years for Hinton to come up with contrast of divergence. Then it was a few more years for the technology, for the computational capabilities to catch up with NVIDIA's CUDA architecture. And then it was Alex Krizhevsky and Ilya Sutskever working as graduate students with Hinton that produced AlexNet. And then Russell and Salakutinov, an entirely different research group within Hinton's overall umbrella, were developing the first Boltzmann machine applications. That was leading to deep learning right then. And so we're seeing Hinton's genius, Hinton being the magician, and then later, as he worked through that creative process, his graduate students who were early adopters, they were able to understand what he was talking about. It was not easy, believe me, not easy, but they could build out his invention to make it real. Third example. Oh, and by the way, Sutskever right now is very well known because he was the chief scientist with OpenAI, and now he's formed his own AI company, SSI. Let's take a third case, Karl Friston. Most of you know who he is. Very few of you have read his work. He's impossible to read. I was having a phone conversation with a colleague last night, and that friend had done a little bit of work with Karl, and he was joking that it was so difficult to read, and that when Karl would explain something using English, that almost made things more difficult. And I was just laughing and agreeing with him, because when I wrote a paper that is published on Archive, and I'll give you the link in the description box, find the link to the blog post. The blog post takes you there. But I wrote a paper that was a tutorial to myself, to teach myself Fristonese. It took 10 years for me to understand that. And of course, Friston has in that time been moving on, bop, bop, bop. He keeps inventing new. He keeps inventing further developments of the same core idea, actually. Creative geniuses. Each of these magicians is spearheading a brand new innovation. They have been boldly going, so to speak. Now, if you're going to build an AGI, even if you're not yet incorporated, but you've got a small team of people, you know each other's capabilities, and you're looking at each other and saying, we could do this. So it's not about the money. Money is nice, but if you've got the right capabilities, you'll probably be able to get that money. So let's get back to this notion of magician-ness. We're looking at people who can create something out of nothing, but it helps to know what this groundswell is in order to move beyond it. Let me tell you a little story. Years and years ago, I was on the board of directors with the McLean Symphony Orchestra. beautiful little community orchestra, all volunteer. The director had a very, very small paycheck from us, and he had to make his living with other means as well. So being an all-volunteer orchestra, they had to pull it together as their passion after their day jobs. And occasionally I would find an excuse to slip in to one of the rehearsals. And it was so fascinating to see the director, Dingwall Fleary, evoke the music from them. He knew what he wanted out of them. He knew how he wanted every single phrase to evolve. And it was a fabulous thing to walk in. He expressed it as saying, you're going through all of this, and it just seems to be not congealing, and then all of a sudden, the magic happens. The magic happens. The magic is not always a single individual on their own, cloistered in their room or their office, massively working through equations or going off into a deep space and thinking through these abstract thoughts. Sometimes the magic is working with a team, and we want to keep that in mind. So let's take this back to the 2 recent job postings and get a sense for how it is that we might move beyond having a simple engineering mindset and go more towards thinking about what it takes to be a magician. So let's talk about the 2 job postings. Number 1, of course they wanted somebody to have a PhD. One of the things that I realized in graduate school is that getting your PhD is more about physical endurance than smarts. It's just a matter of tenacity. It's a matter of gritting it through, getting that dissertation done and written up and approved. Yes, you have to be sort of smart, but it's not always the smarts. It's pure sheer determination and will that make for the PhD. So both these job postings wanted PhDs. Fine. A PhD alone does not necessarily guarantee magicianship. It guarantees one level above just knowing the tools and techniques of your trade, but it's not magicianship. It's not a distinguishing factor between engineering and magicians. So one of the things that this first job posting had, in fact their dominant feature, was they wanted programming languages. They wanted a person who was skilled in this, that. There was a long ticky list of programming languages that they wanted the person. Oh my gosh, that communicated a sort of corporate gestalt, a feeling that they had. They wanted somebody to come in and be the heroic person who would stay up all night, and if the more junior programmers and developers were a little stymied, he or she would barrel on through and make the magic happen, so to speak, because of their fluency in programming languages. But let's take a look at the 3 magicians that we know and love. Werbus, Hinton, Friston. Would we hire any of them because of their programming skills? No. When I was getting my research grant awards from various government organizations, military, NSF, others, was I getting it because I was a good programmer? No. We had a budget for the programmers. My time was best spent on the conceptual development and the communication of what we were doing. So it's interesting. They're going with a certain ethos that the person who's going to conceptualize and lead the charge, so to speak, on AGI development is going to be characterized by programming skills. That, to me, honestly, that's engineering. That's an engineering spec sheet for an inherently magician nature job. Pass on that one, even though it's a highly reputable company. And if you want to, if you're that company and you know who you are, we should have a conversation. Okay, next job posting. Again, very, very well-known organization. Not quite the kind of company that you see in the news, but exceedingly well-known, highly respected. They wanted somebody who had a certain minimal H-index. Now, if you're not familiar with that, an H-index is a means of sort of roughly characterizing the productivity and the professional regard for somebody who's engaged in scientific outputs. Your H-index is computed like this. If you publish one paper and one person cites it, you get an H-index of 1. If you publish 2 or more papers, but you've got to have at least 2 citations for at least 2 of those set of papers, you get 2. If you have an H index of 17, which is what they wanted, that means that you've published probably a lot of papers, but at least 17 of them have 17 citations. Okay. It's a measure, it's a metric, it's a way that people try to codify, is this person being professionally productive? And one of the things that we look for is productivity. Do they get stuff out? Do they get it done? But think for a moment about this. We are looking, aren't we, for magicianness. We are looking for somebody who can be creative and innovative. And the people that I've mentioned, well, Werbus really didn't publish. He didn't publish his dissertation until the whole neural network AI thing became a thing, and then he published his dissertation as a book, and he's had articles, but he was not somebody to push the publications thing. Hinton is published a lot. Friston, my God, I can't keep up with Friston. Really, I don't even try. So it's not just are we publishing. What it really is that particular metric is more related to how well is somebody playing the game. Basically, it's how well can they operate within the box. It's an engineering mindset. Let me tell you a little story as to why. A year or so ago, I was asked to review a paper, and I just said no. I've got way too many student papers to review to pick up anything else. But the editor was persistent and desperate, and she got back to me in a second round and said, look, I know you can't review it. Can you think of anybody whom you might know who might be able to review it? And I thought, okay, this person is really desperate. I will have a look. So without agreeing yet at that point to review the paper, I went into Google Scholar and I looked at the author's works. The author had an impressive H index. It's like, wow, how did this person get such a strong H index? Because when I looked at the nature of the paper, just from the abstract at that point, this was a new step in a new area that wasn't particularly all that strong. And so I went back and looked again at what gave this person that strong an H index. And what had happened was that during that person's graduate career, they were apparently within a group where the PhD lead, the chief professor, so to speak, was publishing massively and putting everybody's name, okay, this is a game, putting everybody's name on all of the papers. So there could be 20 or more names per paper. And as soon as a student comes into the group, they're inducted into this little coterie of people who are being published as a group by the chief professor. So they get their name on a whole lot of papers, and their H index mounts up incredibly, but it's not a true reflection of their unique capabilities. Interesting. So here this person is trying to break out from that little group mindset and start their own work, and was looking for somebody, please just review me and get me published, because this is, for all practical purposes, a cold start. And so I said yes. And I found another colleague who was going to be willing to review, and we got reviews done, and I believe that, I know that person got published. So H index, though, is it a guarantee of professional productivity, creativity? Not sort of, maybe, because other people are citing you, so that's a degree, but that's a system, that's a game. It can be gamed. So I don't really look at H index as that useful a metric. So what are you going to do? Here we are. We're looking, you and I, you're looking for magicians. You're going to try to find at least the top people who are going to lead you into AGI have to have a magician-ish quality to them. But they may not be that easy to find. In fact, it's more likely than not that they will have adopted some sort of protective cover. Protective cover in my case, for example, has been that I've been teaching at Northwestern University in the SPS Master of Science in Data Science MSDS program for almost a decade. It's been my cover story, It's provided a modest little income, and most importantly, they don't try to own my intellectual property. Very important. So my own company, Themesis, is the host and encapsulating chalice for my inventions. But not everybody can do that. Your younger people, those that are professionally upwards and have families and have mortgages, and if you get them to move to join you, they're going to need to have a certain base salary, which will be nice, very nice. They can't afford to do things like teach in a university as adjunct faculty while they develop their own stuff. They just flat out can't afford it. So where are you going to find them? Well, we're going to pick up on this because this is the most important question that you can be addressing right now. It's not, are we doing neurosymbolic? It's not, how are we going to couple the two together? We'll talk about that, I promise. We will get into a little bit of tech talk as our time goes on. But all the tech talk in the world isn't going to work unless you can find the people who can internalize the notions of neuro and symbolic and the connectivity and the other issues which are going to start to emerge as we make real AGIs. You're going to be looking for an exceedingly rare beast. So backing off from creating an engineering style ticky list of the kind of people that we'll look for and into how would we conceptualize finding a magician, and knowing that those magicians may be highly enmeshed in their protective cover, and they may not even be aware that you're looking for them, so they may not know that the time has come for them to throw off the cover and say, oh, here I am, I'm what you've been looking for all along. So you'd have to flush them out somehow. Not an easy thing. But we'll talk about this. So, Aliana Moren from Themesis. If you're interested in making sure that you get all the content that is coming up in this area, not just do the usual subscribe and like. Of course you will. I expect you will. But please go to the Themesis.com website. Find the About page, scroll down, find our opt-in form, fill it in. Offer up an email address. You'll get a word from us on a regular basis on not just the YouTubes, we put out the word there, but also the blogs. Typically the YouTubes and the blogs are conjoint. They hook together. So the YouTube is like the lecture, so to speak, and the blog is the reading material with links to all the supporting materials which you want, nicely formatted. References, of course, to prior blog posts, prior YouTubes by others that you may want to know about. So it's your resource caddy. It's all the support material that you would need, and it's much more comprehensive than would easily fit into a little description box. So please, opt in, give up your email, do the confirmation, drag the emails that you get from us over to your inbox, into your preferred folder, open them up on a regular basis, click on through, see what we're offering, and see what kinds of goodies we're starting to give you, even at the very removed distance of us not knowing each other personally yet. You're just sort of checking out the offerings and doing your does this make sense taste test. So with that in mind, thank you so much. Aliana Moren from Themesis, signing off. Have a lovely day.